All right, we're live. GM, everybody. Welcome to what's going to be another great DevNTell. So if you didn't know, DevNTell is a 30-minute podcast for builders to showcase something they're passionate about. I've been working on in Web3. It's going to be an awesome project you've been working on, demonstrating unit testing best practices, automation goodies, smart contracts, how to structure a project, etc. Basically, if you got a passion for something, this is your opportunity to share it with the wonderful developer DAO community here. And today I'm ecstatic to have on Christian and Ben from Noves. Welcome, gang. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Hey, thanks. Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, anytime. So I guess before we get into the meat of the content, did you guys want to do a brief introduction about yourselves, just for folks who aren't familiar?
Sure. Yeah, so I've been in the crypto space for a long time, but really professionally just for the last few years since Ethereum came along and we were able to actually start building cool software that did something that could run in the chains and do something interesting. And I've basically been focused almost exclusively on the data side since I started working on it.
And then myself, awesome. I got into crypto like in 2020. Panic sold a bunch of crypto in the very beginning, and then like did a little research, and I was like, all right, cool, I'm all in. And then, mostly like a marketing background. And so I just did like very little stuff, started to, collect bounties in a couple of like marketing DAOs, and found my way to Noves, and been there for about a year. And yeah, what we're building is really cool. Excited for us to show today.
Excellent. Just in the interest of time, let's get right into the content. Ben, you good for me to add your screen, right?
Yep, sure.
Cool.
So, man, I have so many things that I could possibly cover today, and I talk a lot, so I'm going to kind of jump around and just get a bunch of things out there, but I'm certainly happy to take any questions or to try to clarify anything if something I say is not clear right off. So, like I mentioned, Noves is basically focused on trying to help people get data off the chain in a way that is easier to work with and easier to understand. There's a ton of different data projects out there, but almost everyone is real focused on what is available. Like, let's just show you what we have. And a lot of times that doesn't answer the questions that people want. And so we've come at it from the other side, which is, what is it that people want? What is it that people want to know? And then we try to bring the data to them in that way. So I'm just going to flip through a few slides in this presentation to kind of talk about the problem. So the problem with blockchain data is that we often have a lot of the data, but it isn't what we want. Like, I've got all these fields about gas. I don't know if I care that much about that. What I really want is to know what in the world this transaction did. What was it that was happening? Or if you look back in your history and, you can see you had a bunch of transactions, but without going into those, clicking through the block explorer, you have no idea what it was that you were doing. And really, I just want to know at a glance, like what was happening. So why is this problematic? It's problematic because people keep building new things. I skipped through this. Like, people keep building new things, and everybody does whatever they want. And the data that comes out of it looks different from thing to thing to thing. And there's no real thought given to what's going to happen to people after this happens. Builders are just trying to do cool things, and they're not thinking about the aftermath of it. So we do have data. There are events. There's things like swaps. We can go through here and we can parse through it. But the problem is that, like I said, everybody does their own individual version of how these things work. So like for swaps, some of these things, like this is a really basic swap. You can see you've just got one in, one out, so we can easily figure out what that was. But if we look at things like limit orders, now you can see there's a whole bunch of transfers that happened inside here. It's a little harder at first glance to just see what it was that was going on. And when we look into the data, here, instead of a swap or an exchange, the actual function that got called was a settle orders. And it doesn't take something simple like just the in and the out or the token address. It takes an entire bytes full of data. So we have to go in and dig through more of the data to figure out what happened. And for normal people, or even honestly technical people who are trying to not spend their whole day digging through data, this is just like a pain in the neck, and it's not what people would like to have for an experience. This all gets even more complicated when we get into smart contract wallets, account abstraction, the 4337 stuff, because now instead of this simple formula that you had before where you find the function, you kind of look at the events and you map it, now all of these transactions just run handle ops. And so you can't even actually see in the transaction that's being run what's happening. You see something like this that's just got this massive blob of data. So in order to make sense out of this, you actually have to go find the smart contract wallet and see what they're doing inside there, right? So now we find this, we can go look up the smart contract wallet. Now we can go iterate inside of that to figure out, okay, what did this get passed off to? And we go even, it gets even worse than that because most smart contract wallets are in fact proxies that hand this stuff off to some other contract, or they're a multi-call because they want to be able to bundle, you know, multiple transactions together, batch them up and run them. So this starts to get almost impossible. Like if you try to go look these things up on Etherscan, you'll find that you really can't make much sense out of what's happening there without an entire afternoon devoted to it. So this is kind of the core problem that we started out trying to tackle, and we have this this block explorer up on Linea called Linea for Humans that demonstrates. It's not meant to be like a complete block explorer, but it's meant to demonstrate the other side of the coin, the data that we think people would like to have, and the experience that most people in their day-to-day would want when they're looking at a block explorer, which is, you know, just tell me what these transactions were in simple English so I can tell. And when we look into the detail of a transaction, you know, give me some info and show me simply the things that mattered. So like in this view, what we do is we parse through the transaction, we filter out all of the transfers that aren't relevant to the wallet that was running this transaction, and then we tag up the individual details, the individual token flows. We tag up the purpose of each of those flows, so you know what was going on in the transaction and why those tokens were moving. And the core underneath of this is just like a display that wraps around it. Underneath, you know, this is what we're actually producing. We're a data company. We're not a UI builder. We're not an app builder. We're not a block explorer company, certainly. But what our core tech is to understand deeply what is happening inside transactions and then provide a data stream that other builders can use to create experiences that are better for users, which at the end of the day is, I think, what's needed for us to move this space forward and to be able to bring more people in and to do more interesting things. On that note, you know, I think that right now, if you want to build in the space, you have to spend a lot of time doing data processing work that really isn't probably part of what it is that you want to do, right? When you have this idea and you sit down to do something, you're like, I want to make this thing. You probably aren't thinking, I want to spend, you know, 2 months trying to figure out the data so that I can then go do this thing that I want to do. And so our focus is on trying to enable people to skip that whole step and leap forward to just building the cool and interesting things. So any questions about that? Or Christian, anything that you want to chime in on sort of the problem and how we're approaching it?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like when I think of you know, I think of it more even when I got into the space. For most of developer DAO, for example, like you're coming into it with a highly technical viewpoint. And like we're in this silo within developer DAO looking at it from a technical standpoint. And like you have a very high technical literacy, and the ability to understand this information or be able to parse through the data comes a little more naturally. And so like for me, who when I first got into the space, very novice and have very little to no understanding of the information, it takes, you know, months to understand how the data works and how it gets processed from every different smart contract is going to display this information differently and give you a different function. It's a nightmare. And so, you know, when I started to understand how we were solving this problem with our data, it just kind of clicked for me. It just made a lot of sense. And I've gotten that feedback pretty often from most people who have seen our data and seen the current state of data and what it could be. Typically that response is, okay, that makes sense. But you kind of have to see the difference before you can understand it.
It is funny. Sometimes you'll talk to people who are in marketing or BD or something in our space. And especially like I'll talk to somebody from a chain and they'll give me a whole run through of their tech and they'll say, well, I'm not actually that technical. You'd have to talk to one of our developers, but their level of technical proficiency is extremely high. It's just in this space, that bar is thrown completely out of whack compared to the rest of the world. So I do think that it's kind of easy to take for granted the sort of base layer of knowledge and understanding that people have, even if they aren't the technical people. And especially for developers, it's easy to kind of glide over that, like you said. So I want to talk a little bit about where we're going and our roadmap, and kind of have this notion that this is sort of the state of affairs right now in the blockchain space, which is we have the execution side of the blockchain, which is nicely organized. In today's world, it's probably modular and it's very finely tuned. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's deterministic. You know before you get into it what it's going to cost for you to do the thing you want to do, and you know whether it's going to work or not. And that's great. And that's, I think, a really good environment for building cool things, for trying stuff, for testing things. And I think we all agree that that's great. And then we have trying to get data about what happened. And that's just all been completely thrown to the wind. We just leave that to every third-party vendor to figure out whatever they want to do, whatever they want to offer, whatever spaces they want to be in, or chains they do or don't want to index, or how much they want to charge for it. And we think that that's holding back our ability to iterate and to build and to do new things. We think that what we should have is the same kind of structured, modular, organized approach to data access that we have for chains. I should know that I can get the data that I need. I should know that I can get it at a very reasonable, I would even say like minimal cost, that someone isn't sitting on top of that and extracting more value than they need to, and that I can rely on that data being there tomorrow and the next day and the next month, and not have to worry that Snowtrace is going to exit the Avalanche ecosystem and leave me high and dry for ABIs or whatever I need. And so Noves is moving towards building a modular protocol for organizing data access. It's not intended to be the data access for everyone, but just a way for us to coordinate the data access within blockchain ecosystems under the stewardship of the blockchain and the members of that ecosystem, so that the people who are running the transactions and actually interacting on the chain sort of have a hand in how they get the data and in making sure that that data is available to them so that they don't end up in a bad position. So part of this is us working to design schemas that capture the data in a way that we can agree on. We're working to try to set some standards around how data access works that other data providers and other service providers who need the data can agree on, so that we have a standard way to interact. If we didn't have the ERC20 standard, blockchains would be complete chaos, because there would be no way for anybody to build anything meaningful. Like, having that standardized way of dealing with tokens is what enabled the space to rapidly build pieces that plug together and work together nicely. And we need to do the same thing for data access at a more semantic layer, at a layer of meaning, instead of just this kind of like raw layer where everything exists right now. So once that's sort of deployed and we have this idea of these sort of like standardized chunks of data, like this is what financial blockchain data looks like, this is what security data looks like, and this is how like raw data looks, then pieces of the system like wallets or like block explorers or you know, your accounting stack, your accountant, your tax preparer can rely on those standard formats of data to be able to easily retrieve that and to pull it out. So for us, this looks like, you know, our existing translate API that knows how to turn raw data into something meaningful can plug into that financial data component, can plug into that block explorer component to provide that data into those systems. But the end tools, the wallets themselves or the block explorers, can integrate with that standardized layer instead of having to tie into Noves directly, so that if we get acquired and decide to shut down the translate API because whoever bought us doesn't want that side of the business anymore, the ecosystem that people have built on top of those things, they can just switch to a different data provider who meets that same spec, or maybe even run their own, right? I'm going to leap ahead a couple here, but for instance, for transaction simulation, we have the Foresight API, which does really nice human-friendly simulations. It works with user ops and 4337, but we also plan to release an open source transaction simulator. And both of those would plug into the generic simulation schema, so that a wallet doesn't have to worry that if we decide to, you know, double our prices or if we disappear, that suddenly they have built an integration with something that they don't have support for. And we've heard that expressed with people that they're nervous about even getting into advanced capabilities, because if they build something assuming they'll have it and they don't have it anymore, then they've created an expectation and an experience for their users that they can't fulfill. And we just want to remove that layer of risk so that people are able to have optionality in their basic data that we all need to operate safely, because nobody should be blind signing transactions without some kind of a simulation. And yet still it's not ubiquitous. And we really want to be a force for good in the space to move that along through our own paid services, but also through open source tooling and through providing people with some guidance on how to do that more effectively, and how we can all be in a better situation with respect to the data that we have. So we do have, we have a pricing API. We sell some pricing data to some oracles and we use it for our own things. We're partnering with Block Scout. We're bringing our transaction data that I was showing from the Linea for Humans app. We're going to have that available to be integrated into Block Scout. We're also planning to integrate our pricing feeds into Block Scout. So especially for app chains, roll-ups, smaller chains where maybe everything on the chain isn't on CoinGecko, that we would have our own price feeds that can also be brought in there, so that you can still have that experience of knowing what's happening without having to get everything run through a centralized provider. And I think that's kind of I guess the summary would be that, again, we have this idea of core data, things that are just kind of basic and assumed. And we want to make sure that everybody in every blockchain ecosystem has the ability to bring that core data to their users without the team having to do all of the legwork to make that happen, because it's a lot. So we just want to set that baseline and raise the bar for basic data that's always available.
Yeah, this is amazing. The just like these constructs that you've put forward are going to be very powerful, and the way I've understood it is you have kind of a couple of pillars that you're hinging on here, where you have this standardized schema in the same vein as how OpenSea defined like the NFT schema, and everybody hopped on that and gave order to a chaotic world. And it seems like you're doing the same thing for the broad spectrum of transaction data, which is really awesome. Two things that kind of pop in my mind, or have been kind of bubbling ever since you guys started, was kind of this benefit to two sides of the spectrum. So one is like the average person who wants to just make sense of what's happening. And as Billy mentioned in the comments, this smells like a series of modules for upcoming tax season to make sense of all the crypto flips and whatnot people have done. And then the other side of the coin is how people who are developers who are whether they're on call or whatnot, they often have to get stuck reading this transaction data to debug what's going on. So it seems like this would be a very powerful construct to plug into an observability stack, for say, for example, to be able to translate this data. Have you guys been thinking about that?
Yeah. So on the first point, on the tax side, we work with some accountants and some tax providers. It's kind of where we started from in our focus. So we are. I thought I had some slides in here about it, but I guess I missed it. But we do have a transaction exporter that we're working to get released, hopefully as open source, or if not, at least in the short term, maybe to operate as a public good, where you would be able to go there, you put in your wallet, and it would just give you a single file dump in a CSV that's accountant friendly. It sounds ridiculous because we've been building here for so long, so many people, and yet still just getting that is hard. You can get it from Etherscan for mainnet, but you have to do it from 5 separate tabs. The 5 tabs don't have the same columns. So then you got to bring it into Excel, and then you got to kind of manipulate it from there. So anyway, we are working on that tool. It will just give you a nice clean export so that people can get their data and not have to spend their whole lives messing with that kind of thing at tax time. And then on the other topic, I don't think I can say any names publicly yet, but we have completed a trial with one of the major security companies where we run a full sort of like descriptive breakdown of a large transaction for a DAO and highlight, in this case, it was an exploit, but highlight before they complete the transaction what that thing is doing, and allow the person to see in this extensive set of contracts run by a custom contract whether they would actually want to approve that transaction and allow that to happen, and what the kind of series of steps were. So we did a little bit of custom work to make that happen. I'm definitely interested in exploring that a bit more because I have looked at some exploits and stuff, and it's pretty difficult to wind your way through all of the things that are going on in there.
Yeah, I would imagine security auditing would benefit from this greatly, just by being able to run simulations on smart contracts or whatnot to fish all that kind of stuff out, which is awesome to hear. We do have a couple questions from the crowd. One of them is from Paul, who asks or says the Translate API looks awesome, and whether there are any plans to start indexing social transactions from protocols like Lens.
That's a good question. I haven't personally gotten involved with Lens. I've just recently gotten pretty active on Farcaster. So we were playing around in that space. They're pretty developer focused and developer friendly. We aren't currently indexing any of their data. Of course, theirs is, most of the data for Farcaster is not on chain. That's running through their hubs, and there's some other APIs and stuff being built there. It's definitely something we're keeping an eye on, I guess. for the moment, and I don't know Lens very well, and maybe Paul, you can answer this since I don't, or one of you guys knows, but to the degree the data sits on a public chain and is available, we would already be processing that data. I haven't seen it specifically, so I don't know what it looks like when it comes through our system. But if it's on chain, we are definitely processing it. We're currently on 30-ish blockchains, and we cover essentially any transaction from any protocol on those chains. So,
Gotcha. I guess perhaps this is a nice tangent question, but is your schema kind of like a one-size-fits-all for data, or can there be customization or extensions of that schema to better fit specific sets of data?
yeah, so the answer is yes. Yes, to both. So we do have a sort of predefined taxonomy that we fit everything into. I think we have 70 or 80 different transaction types that everything gets crammed into. Most things fit pretty nicely, like swaps, but there are things where, like if you're updating the fee on a pool or something like that, we don't have a specific type that captures that. We would put that into like a generic protocol admin type of a transaction. Having said that, we do have the ability to overlay more specific types. So like if we were working with someone on a specific use case where they wanted to have very granular types, our system has no problem overlaying like a second taxonomy over the top to give that data. Just for most people, like if you're writing a tax processor, you don't want to deal with 500 different types of transactions because they're not that important, right? There's only the kind of like summary ones that are more important. So
makes sense. And I guess just looking at time here, what's the best way for folks to start playing around with Noves? Yeah, if people are interested today, how can they go and start playing around?
Yeah, so we do have a free account. You can go sign up and grab a key that would give you access to any chain that you want to use, and you can run the Translate API. If you want to simulate transactions, you can do that through Foresight, and certainly, hit me up with any questions, comments, suggestions, ideas. Like we love to engage with people and hear what's working great or what they would like to have or anything like that. We're quite happy to be involved.
Awesome. And will you guys be at ETH Denver if folks watching this are there? They want to
Yes,
mingle?
we'll be around ETH Denver. We are going to be set up at Christian. I'm going to let you jump in here, and I don't want to
Epic ETH Infra Day, and then for a period of time at the Linea booth. I think that's in ETH Denver. So
yeah, and then we're around there all week. So certainly hit us up, and we'd be happy to grab coffee or just chat, whatever.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm sure there'll be quite a few DD folks you'll be rubbing shoulders with, and I'm sure they'll be asking you all these wonderful questions. And I guess finally, on your previous point, if people do want to get in touch with you, what's the best way? Should they reach out over Twitter or Discord? What would you recommend?
Yeah, Twitter's fine, or better yet, Farcaster. You can find me at NVBen on Farcaster, or happy to have someone reach out over, or even email is fine. Ben@noves.fi.
Awesome. And what about yourself, Christian?
you can find me in Discord, in DD, at Christian Reza, first name, last name, Farcaster at Christian. Got it a little bit early, got lucky.
Excellent. That's just the way. All right, gang. We can go a little bit over time if you want, if there's any more content from your end.
I think I somehow managed to cram out in everything that I was
I don't know how you did that. That was a lot.
Excellent. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. we still have 10 seconds to spare. So that's great.
Right on time.
Right on time. And just before everybody leaves today, I just want to share this QR code here for folks to scan who are live attendees today to be able to claim their NFT for attending live today. So what you want to do is scan this QR code, fill out the form, and you will be airdropped a NFT for being an attendee today on DevNTell within the next couple of days on the Base network. So make sure to check your Base wallet over the next handful of days if you fill out this form, and you will be seeing a nice little NFT from the DAO. And you'll have an hour and a half from this point to be able to fill that out. And with that, I just want to thank Ben and Christian so much for coming on the show. This was really interesting to see, and particularly I'm quite keen on seeing the development of this, because I think this is a very important problem you guys are solving, especially for whether it's companies or regular folks who want to just make sense of their of their on-chain activity. I think this is a very important project. So looking forward to you guys continuing to build this out. Good stuff.
Thanks a lot, Nar. Appreciate you having us on. Nice chatting.
My pleasure. My pleasure. All right, all. Hope you all have a nice Friday. Happy weekend. And we'll catch you back here for another episode of DevNTell next week. All right, all. Cheers.
Bye.